Okay, good day everyone. So today we're going to talk about the characteristics of a narrative. Okay, so before that, let us define first the term narrative. Ayan. So when we speak of narrative, narrative is a story that is created in a constructive format which describes a sequence of fictional or non-fictional events. So when we talk about fictional events, these are events that usually happened or transpired uh, on the imagination of the writer. So, meaning the characters involved, the setting or the place involved in this kind of event or situation is created by the writer. On the other hand, when we talk about non-fictional events, it features or it includes people or characters and situations, places that exist in real life. So, meaning when we talk about narrative, it may contain imaginary characters or things that are made up by the writers or even things that really exist in real life. Okay, so the term narrative is derived from the Latin verb narrare, which means to recount. So, meaning in this kind of text or in this kind of piece, writers need to recall something. Okay, writers need to recall information that they are willing to share or to tell to their audience or readers. And the Latin verb narrare is related to an adjective narus, which means knowing or skilled. So if we will be combining the definition of the adjective narus and the verb nare, we may form a definition or the definition of a narrative wherein it is a piece of writing written by a skilled person in recalling something or in remembering something. Okay, so it is a story that tells an a situation that might be imaginary or real. Okay, so next are the meaning or the definition of a narrative. So, what is meant by narrative writing? So, when we speak of narrative writing, what do we mean by this? So, narrative writing is also known as creative writing. So, a narrative writer seeks to entertain the reader. So, that is the main purpose or the main goal of narrative texts to entertain the readers, to amuse them, to give them entertainment. So, a fully developed narrative fiction or even nonfiction should have a central theme. So it must have a central idea or a central concept. So that theme must be introduced on the beginning of the story or on the beginning of the text. And then after the introduction, it will be followed by the development of the theme, which we usually encounter on the rising action, and then it will be followed by an eventful middle or the what we call climax or the most important part of our text, and then the text or the narrative text will end with a memorable ending, or we will give them an ending which they will remember. Okay, so that is a characteristic or the characteristic of a narrative writing. So you must have a central theme, and that theme will be introduced on the part of your text. We can classify narrative writing into three types, and those are personal narrative, or also known as autobiography. So when we talk about personal narrative or narratives, these are accounts or story of a person's life written by himself or herself. So meaning it's a story of the writer's life. Okay, it features his or her story. Okay, and then the second type of it is imaginative narrative. writing. If in personal narrative you feature your own life, it is based on your experiences, it is based on real events. Imaginative narrative writing is the counterpart of it. Okay? In here, you may talk about anything. You may talk about the things that you have imagined before. Or you may feature here your what ifs. Okay? Usually, the most interesting stories came from the what if question. Okay? And that question will be answered by the story. So, that's imaginative writing or imaginative narrative writing. These are narrative texts which are, or that which are based on the imagination of our writer. Okay, so in here you can play with your characters, you can play with your setting. And then lastly, we have narrative essay. It is more like a personal narrative. Narrative essay is also based on facts. It is based on evidences. In here, you are writing about a certain situation that happened in the past. In here, you are telling a story or your own experiences. Compared to the first two types of narrative writing, we may say that a narrative essay is the shortest among the three. Okay, it is quite short. You can just have 5 to 10 paragraphs, which will feature your experiences or story. Okay, so those are the three types of narrative writing. Okay, next are the conventions of narrative writing. So these are the common features or um, the common characteristics that you will see uh, among the narrative text that you will encounter. So first, narrative texts can be or narratives can be written in third person point of view, meaning the narrator or the speaker of the text or the writer will be using pronouns like he, she, it, them, they, its, hers, his. Okay, those are the common pronouns that you will encounter if the narrative text is written or told using third person point of view. But most of the narrative text that you will encounter is written in the first person point of view, meaning the author or the narrator of the text is also part of the story. So in here, you're going to encounter pronouns I and we. So those are the common pronouns that you will encounter when you are reading or even writing a narrative text in the first person point of view. Okay, next, all narratives should have a concrete theme. They should have a setting, characters, a climax, and a good ending. So when we speak of concrete theme, you must have a central theme or idea. So for example, your narrative text will talk about good versus evil, or it will talk about immoral versus moral, or it will feature love, faith, destiny, war, friendship. So your narrative text should have one or at least one of those mentioned central or general universal themes. Okay. Also, you must feature a setting. Basically, in order for us to make a story, we must have characters. Okay. And then climax or the most important, most interesting part of the story. And the narrative text must have an impactful ending. Okay, that's the second convention of narrative writing. Next, ayan. So in narrative writing, writer or a writer has to provide all the essential details to create a unified and dominant impression on the readers. So meaning the text must have coherence so that the readers will easily understand and easily follow your story. Okay? You must provide them information about your characters. You must provide them information about your setting so that they will not be confused when they are reading your text. Okay, and then narrative writing can be found in novels, biographies, autobiographies, essays, and short stories. So we usually encounter narrative writing on those kind of texts. So again, just like what I have said a while ago, the narrative text should contain an entire story, meaning you should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay, and it should cover all the necessary details uh, that will explain the story, that will help the readers to follow your story. So those are the conventions of a narrative writing. Next will be the different types of characters. So since we have discussed that a narrative writing or a narrative text must have characters. So you may use different types of characters when dealing with you or when you are writing your narrative text. So when we talk about characters, a character is a person or an animal or even an inanimate object that presents the story. They act in our story. They represent people from real world in the story that you are writing. So we may categorize characters into different types. So the first categorization is dynamic character versus static character. So in order for us to identify if the character is dynamic or static, we're going to look at the changes they underwent, okay, or the changes they have experienced throughout the story. If your character changes over time, so for example, from being good to becoming an evil, your character or that character is a dynamic character. But if the character does not experience any change at all, the character will be classified as a static character. So meaning all throughout the story, the character is kind or he remains evil or she remains evil from the start up to the end of the story. The next classification or categorization is rounded or round character and stock or flat character. So in here, in order for us to identify if the character is a round or flat character, we're going to look at their characteristics or personality or on the way they react on a certain situation. A round character is fully developed. So meaning if we will be comparing his reaction or his action to a certain situation to the reaction of a person in real life, they are the same. Okay, they will react the same uh, to a certain situation. On the other hand, if we have a flat character, the reaction, the characteristic, and even the actions of this kind of character are predictable. So meaning if we talk about maids, which is usually a flat character, if we talk about them in a certain story, we know their characteristic or we already knew their characteristics that they are wearing a certain type of uniform. They're always following the instructions of their bosses or of their sirs or madams or mams. So meaning their characteristics are already given. Unlike in round character, they will always surprise us with their characteristics or personality. And then lastly, we may classify characters according to their role in the story. Okay? So we may categorize them into three actually: the protagonist, antagonist, and tritagonist and deuteragonist. So protagonist is considered as the hero of the story. Okay? This protagonist is the central character of the story. This is our Darna in the story. So protagonist is the hero of a literary work, and it must be a rounded character. So meaning protagonist characters or protagonists encounter changes. On the other hand, we have antagonist. Okay, so the force working against the protagonist, and we usually call antagonist the villain. So an antagonist may be a round character or a stack or flat character. So we usually encounter antagonists as kind characters at the beginning of the story, and then they suddenly change at the middle of it. Or sometimes from the start up to the end of the story, they are just evil. Okay? So an antagonist's character may be a round character or a dynamic character or a static character. So meaning they may change or they may not experience changes on the story that we are reading. And then lastly, we have the tritagonist, or sometimes they are calling it deuterogonist. So deuterogonists are the side characters, or we may also call them extra. Okay, they are the minor characters of a certain story. So meaning their contribution on the story is not that big or not that important. Okay? So those are the different types of characters. Next, we will be having the age of chivalry. So the age of chivalry ranges from or lasted from 1,000 up to 1,500, okay, or 1,500. So the age of chivalry is also known as the age of horse or horses, because in this specific time period, we give importance to soldiers, we give importance to knights. And usually, if we are talking about knights, they usually ride or they are usually riding horses. Okay? So in here, horses are decorated in an elaborate armor and other trappings. So meaning they are dressed, okay? They are full dressed. So certainly well-dressed horses were featured on prominently during this period or this time period. So we really give importance to this specific period. So the age of chivalry is a time when men were courageous and courteous. Okay, so meaning in this kind of time period, we look at men on their ideal characteristics. Okay, so in this period, ladies were fair and respected. We give importance to ladies or women, and the clash of arms was an embodiment of Christian piety. Okay, so meaning in this time period, conquering kingdoms to somehow spread Christianity is really rampant. Okay, and then the themes, event, and characters of the Arthurian legend have varied widely from text to text, and there is no one canonical version. So, meaning in here, you will in this age you will always encounter the legend of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. You will encounter you will always hear the ideal characteristics of a certain warrior or a certain knight or a certain soldier, and you will hear it from different perspectives. Okay, so chivalry is um, a word that brings up ideas of how to treat other people, especially women. Okay, so in the present day, when we speak of chivalry, it gives us the idea on how we will treat women in the society. So the history of the word chivalry dates to the medieval Europe, where the word is often used to refer to cavalrymen. So meaning in the past year, chivalry was a word that will refer to soldier, okay, that will refer to knight, okay, warrior. So later, the word chivalry was used to define the characteristics of a good knight, and it helped to shape the ideals of the times and to pave the way for moral constructs of society. So meaning when we speak of chivalry, we have sets of characteristics that a knight should have. Okay, for example, when we speak of a chivalric man, okay, he should have these features. He should act the way a soldier should act. Okay, so somehow chivalry helps us to give common characteristics to men. Okay, so on this specific lesson, you're going to read a text written by Sir Thomas Malory. Okay, so Sir Thomas Malory, by the age of 23, he seemed to be um, he seemed to be following his father's footsteps as a respectable landowner. So, during his time or during the time of his father, he is known for being a respectable owner of land. Okay, so in 1441, Sir Thomas became a knight. So that's why he is referred to Sir Thomas. So during their time, if you became a knight from being a regular or a usual man, you will be addressed as Sir. So for example, Sir Lancelot and so on and so forth. So he is married to Elizabeth Walsh and have a son, Robert. Okay. So in 1450s, he committed a number of crimes. So because of maybe abuse of power, he committed several crimes. So he was known as the recorder of Arthurian romances, specifically that of the masterpiece Le Morte d'Arthur. Okay, so he became popular because of this specific text. So on the text that you are about to read, you will encounter the life of King Arthur and how he became king. Okay, so I want you to read that text, and um, after that, you will answer the exercise wherein you're going to look for five important events in the story or in the text, and you will show the effects of those events to the life of King Arthur. Okay, so that is your task for this lesson. So you're going to submit that activity on our next meeting. Okay, so if you have question, you may ask me on our GC and I will going to answer all of your questions. So thank you for listening and see you on our next meeting.